Law had been fearing the question ever since the ship had passed by the station, internally sweating when she had been having lunch in the massive restaurant level. Bearing a massive white skull atop a black painted hull, the flat, heavily armed ships were extremely hard to miss. The students had all seen it pass by the station on its way to the current planet the humans were fighting on, but Miss Law feared what was on board that vessel more than the students' questions. If anything, she was unsure how the students would react knowing such beings were held on the surface of Earth, lurking in the kennels under the watchful eye of their vets. The real reason why the humans had managed to fend off the Pactless. Miss Law left her room with dragging, sluggish steps, having been unable to fully sleep the entire night as she struggled to formulate her thoughts on what those students were going to ask her when they arrived. The little delivery bot, to her surprise, had been waiting at the doors as soon as it opened, bearing 2 vanilla lattes. "What's this?" Miss Law had asked, leaning down to grab one of the offered cups. The little delivery bot had wagged a clawed hand at her.
"Come on now, no reading no major bandwidth draws, and you forgot to put in your order. That means you are worried about those students asking about the ship."
"Even we scholars of humanity have good reason to feel uncomfortable when we see a midnight alcove," Miss Law replied, walking down the hallway as the little delivery bot trundled along beside her. "A ship of iron bars and cells, armories, and monsters that not even I can mentally wrap my mind around. Have you ever been around one, AI?" The little delivery bot shook its head, wheels whirring near Miss Law's shins.
"Of course not. They don't allow AI on those ships, nor would I want to be. Normally, I like the human temples, but the ones on those boats have an energy that not even we can contemplate in our binary."
"The students are not going to like what they hear," Miss Law murmured, taking a slow sip of her latte before clicking her tongue and closing her 4 eyes in a sigh. "No one likes what they hear when they learn of the disease. It's why the Paw and Katja are suspicious of humanity as a whole." By some way, the delivery bot managed to shrug with its delivery arms.
"Sounds like a you problem there, Teach."
"Thank you for reminding me," Miss Law grumbled. With a cheery wave, the delivery bot handed Miss Law her other latte and turned the corner, speeding off towards the restaurant level.
"Good luck with the students!"
Miss Law grimaced, mocking the little robot in a sing-songy, false, happy voice. "Good luck with the students, meh, meh, meh." It didn't take long for Miss Law to reach her classroom and found with a glare of annoyance that all the students had arrived well before her, ready and waiting to pepper her with questions. Miss Law still found herself standing outside the classroom, building up the energy to dive into this particular dark corner of the humans and the afflictions their war of survival had impregnated them with. She knew she had to get in there eventually, so she strode into the classroom with as much calm air as she could, trying not to betray her unease. Towering above many of them, Miss Law tossed one empty latte into the trash slot, set the other one down on her desk, but did not bother sitting down. Miss Law straightened her sweater, popped the hem, then crossed her arms under her chest, causing the fibers of the sweater to stress outward with a quiet groan of the fibers. "All right," Miss Law said aloud, grimacing. "Who's first?" Every hand within the classroom raised into the air, which the Kojin applied in duplicate. Miss Law, however, instead turned to Lyra, the only white-furred Katja in the room that was still sitting on the opposite side of the room to her race. More like they were sitting on the opposite side of the room from her. Miss Law had read up on whatever the hell was going on with that and had found it rather depressing. White-furred Katja were seen as cursed, as they were devoid of color and such were un-Katja-like. This was doubly so due to Lyra's black eyes, forming the yin and yang of having all colors in her eyes, but lacking any color to her fur. What had really bothered Miss Law was that while researching the whole thing, she had hit a literal roadblock. Any and all information on the white-furried Katja stopped, as if it had been memory holed or erased, and no amount of deep data stream searching could pull anything to her attentions. There was a rumor that Katja leadership was murdering certain white furs that shined too brightly. But again, it was like pulling anvil scales. She tried to rope in a few bored AI to help her, but even they were surprised when they hit an absolute data desert, scrubbed clean of any mention of white-furred Katja. They were still searching as far as she knew, and she waited with curiosity to see what they could dredge up from the data streams. "Yes, Lyra?" Miss Law asked, pointing a muscled hand at the white-furred Katja. Her eyes sparkled like obsidian jewels, clearly happy that her teacher had remembered her name, something she did not hear much nowadays.
"The black ship,"
Lyra asked, pointing out towards the door.
"With the white human skull. What was that?"
All the eyes in the room turned from Lyra to Miss Law, whose jaw tightened to such a degree that her facial scales flexed. The Scalathyr's muscular blue tail twitched disquietly, her muscles flexing against her sweater as she stressed. "Whatever I say now," Miss Law began, her voice measured but tense, "should not and should never change your opinion about humans or the planet down below us. All races of the stars have their shadows and monsters that hide inside them. And humanity is no different." Miss Law bared her teeth for a scant moment, then slowly began to pace along her little teaching platform. "However, if it was a competition, humans have the scariest monsters this side of the Menthachlorin."
Milky Way, according to the humans.
A male paw with deep purple hair murmured, eliciting a few chuckles from those nearby. "Indeed," Miss Law said, but her voice held no humor, causing the chuckles to dry up as if a re-entry engine had kicked on above a puddle. Miss Law mildly enjoyed their sudden looks of unease. It would get them in the right mindset for what she was about to say. "As you know, the humans spiked in their civilization's power level after their near destruction by the Pactless," she began, still pacing slowly as she spoke. "Due to the munitions used by the Pactless, humanity suffered under a few genetic mutations. You would know them as stung humans. Since we covered them and all the odd little colors they tend to come in. The humans took the recovered technology and began to rapidly rearm and retech themselves to combat any other forces that could come from the stars and attack." Miss Law drew in a long breath through her draconic nostrils, then turned to face the class fully. "But there was another genetic mutation, one that no one knew about until decades after the war with the Pactless. A mutation that was unleashed upon the Ur to devastating effect."
Another mutation?
A Kojin male asked, his 4 hands steepled in interest.
I had believed there was only one mutation, the ones who are stung. There's been no mention of a second mutation to the humans.
Miss Law nodded. "Because it is not spoken of in polite conversation, and due to its use in the war against the Ur, it is not really spoken of at all out of respect. It is only really brought up when a midnight alcove is spotted, and people start asking questions about what lies inside the black ships."
I saw a schematic of the ships on the data stream,
Tilia said quietly, her yellow fur fluffing slightly and bright, lilac eyes wide.
It's just cages, row upon row of cages.
"Cells," Miss Law corrected. "Steel-barred cells for the containment of the RIS units." The room was quiet and slowly, very slowly, Lyra raised her white-furred hand.
RIS units?
She asked, her black eyes wide. Miss Law nodded, her voice low with warning. RIS, redemption in sacrifice.
Redemption?
The male Kojin asked, his mask sprawling with lines of both worry and intrigue. Redemption, Miss Law replied, her voice even. While the stung humans gained odd colorings to their hair and eyes, others instead became ticking time bombs, an untraceable fuse that is hiding in hundreds of thousands of humans. Despite the best efforts of their medical scientists during their resurrection directive phase, they never realized there was a curse lurking amongst the newly reborn, laying in wait for a trigger in order to fully blossom within their minds. Miss Law, arms still folded, stopped on her stage and stood before them fully, eyes filled with sorrow. It is not their fault. How could they have known? How could they have understood that the slapdash and horrible weapons of the Pactless altered their very DNA? The stung were born immediately, bearing their oddities, pink and blue hair where once blonde and brown should have stood. How would they have known something darker lurked beneath? The Quaquid screen came to life with the press of Miss Law's index finger to her thumb pad, and the Scalatheer half turned, unfolding her arms to gesture with a hand. Here we see a normal human male and female. Upon the screen was a normal male and female human, non-stung of average build and height. They were pouring coffee into cups that sat on a stone countertop, steaming, rising from the brim as they smiled at each other. Their ferocity is known, their ability to engage in any enemy they see as a threat if they are shown as a threat to things they hold dear, such as friends and family. Miss Law said, feeling a lump slowly forming in her throat. But they hold back, a limiter placed into their bodies by their very humanity. A greater self that allows them to be the monster that can scoot spiders onto paper, to go out of their way to help a turtle across a road. But that ferocity comes from a place deep down, a feral place within the mind that has been tempered and controlled by thousands of years of development, thousands of years of culture and codes that kept them in check. Miss Law turned back to her class, her face now dire. What do you think would happen if suddenly all the bars and chains were removed from the gate and the doors were allowed to fully swing open? The room grew colder. Lulgaran hoods flared. The mask of the Kojin stopped displaying codes and light. The Drafridi looked uncomfortable for the first time during these classes, while the Kafia and Pwa shared uneasy glances. You get a monster. A real monster, Miss Law said, her tone quiet. You get the raw, feral form of a human and all the horrifying things they are capable of. Strength, bloodlust, speed, the ability to fight for hours on end, smiling with bared teeth as they tear, shred, and kill until either they simply pass out from exhaustion, are killed themselves, or are darted by their handlers. Miss Law pulled up an image of an RIS trooper, the blonde-haired woman smiling ferociously at the screen, while thick blood streamed down her face, armor halfway torn to shreds and her left arm missing at the elbow. The students drew back, though Lyra kept still, her black eyes staring at the screen. Despite the damage to her arm, the grievous wounds trickling crimson blood, the humans seemed unbothered, eyes wide in pleasure and...
She's afraid,
Lyra said quietly, pointing to the woman's eyes.
I see fear. and loathing. Self-loathing.
Miss Law was surprised. Both she and the other scholars had come to that conclusion after years of study and interviews, but this odd little white Katja had picked up on the cues purely off of sight alone. "You would be accurate," Miss Law said, causing Lyra to smile to herself and sit up proudly. "These humans are unlocked, unbound, but highly aware of how broken they are. They do not feel pain the same as other humans or have their control, but they are fully conscious of how wrong everything is. They love pain. They love to hunt, to chase, to kill, to spread terror and slaughter until their very bones and muscles give out. After the first wave of children from the Resurrection Directive aged, murders and killings began to skyrocket in certain areas, not following any kind of pattern that usually came from a more standard murderer or killer. This caused humans to begin hunting these killers and instead found mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters, all unbound, released from their confines of their humanity, and unlocked to be the animals they were always meant to be in the wild. The activation of the altered DNA within them happens randomly, sometimes not until the age of 70, but is triggered by stress, fear, anger, rage, hunger, desire, any strong emotions that have been closely tied with humans. Miss Law sighed, activating the next image that showed a male human teenager raging in a chair, tied and bound by straps as he howled, but with that same feral, intense grin. They are not mad or insane. They are just broken. They can speak, use logic, even operate advanced machinery, but they are extremely unstable. When fed a constant supply of violence and bloodshed, they can manage their symptoms to the point they themselves are controllable. Lilgaran and Kojin medical researchers developed a kind of tranquilizer that takes the edge off of their minds for a while, allowing them to even be sociable. But do not be confused. Underneath an IRS member's muscle and flesh is a cold-blooded, uncaring killer that only mourns their actions in their sleep or when they are left to their own quiet.
"So, on that ship,"
Tilia said, remembering just how large that ship had been, "are hundreds of humans like that, some of them veterans of the Ur conflict, and still able to go toe-to-toe with anything they are thrown at. They are the modern rendition of the Berserker, a warrior of ancient human history, but not by choice. They are an ailment of the Pactless War, still infecting Earth and their colonies to this day. While it would be more benevolent to kill them, these broken humans instead prefer to serve, to gain some form of redemption through service to the human race and their allies. This, in turn, allows them to follow the paths and codes of their religion, as they hope to gain salvation in the afterlife by turning their curses and sins to duty." Miss Law said, bringing up an image of multiple veterans of the Ur conflict, all of them baring their teeth in wide, malicious grins, while their vets lingered behind them. There were 3 males and 2 females, all bearing tattered remnants of combat armor. These 3 men here are the 3 brothers, their entire family line activating during an outing of recreational football during Thanksgiving. The entire genetic line had the altered DNA, and after a stray dog attacked their own beloved family hound and her puppies, they all activated at once, ripping the dog to shreds and nearly killing all of their neighbors before vets could arrive. Only 3 eldest brothers remained, the rest of the family perishing during their combat against the Ur. Miss Law then gestured to a red-haired woman who looked like a predatory cat, though that may have just been due to the massive gauntlet she wore on her hands, bearing long curved knives. This is Cat Claw Kate, who activated after being the victim of a violent rape. When they found her, she had already ripped off both the arms and legs of her rapist and was gouging out his eyes with her thumbs. Authorities had been alerted by the man's screams, who died shortly thereafter from blood loss. Then there is Mad-Eye Millie. Miss Law sighed out, gesturing to the blue-haired woman who bore bright orange eyes. She bore both genetic markers, a stung human who turned out to be a living bomb. After being asked to marry her boyfriend of 5 years, she had been happy, preparing to make a new life with the man she loved. Her fiancé, however, was caught in the middle of a robbery and killed, the perpetrators being a pair of rogue Dornaka smugglers attempting to make off with Earth-made emeralds to sell on the black market. A female Poi actually shook her head, looking aghast.
Dornaka smugglers? How did those fin-headed scumbags get down to Earth in the first place?
Hiding within a Kojin trading barge and deploying a slip skiff, they had hoped to skip right off of Earth, regardless of the damage it would have done to the surrounding area. Instead, they were gunned down by human authorities and created a monster that killed 17 Drafriti and Kojin families out of grief. Miss Law said, her eyes softening as she stared at the vacant eyes of Mad-Eye Millie. The loss of her happiness and it being stolen by off-worlders made Millie into a demon made real, tearing through non-human life like a blender. The room was quiet as Miss Law brought forward the next image, a legion of humans chained to the ground in kneeling positions as their armor was placed upon them by mechanical armory arms. They were not bad people, Miss Law said quietly, her voice easily carrying above the silence. They were good people who had no idea what they were, who became beasts when the wrong thing happened to them at the wrong time. They now live as weapons, thrown at an enemy in the hope they can be redeemed in their death, to pay for their sins and to die as soldiers instead of murderers. She turned to the students, her strong draconic hands flexing. That ship you saw, bearing a white skull on a black hull, carries the demand. Broken humans who are only seeking to find peace in their death, fighting against an enemy. All of you know where the humans are currently fighting, a young world where the inhabitants were being stolen by flesh traders. That RIS vessel carries not one, but 3 companies of these damned souls who are biting at the chance to die fighting for such a worthy cause. Miss Law then raised her head slightly, bearing down on her voice with authority. You did not see soldiers passing us by on that ship. You saw people who deserved to die as good rather than bad. No matter how much damage they take in the process, they are tired, frayed, and exhausted to the soul, bound in the flesh of murderers, killers, and slaughterers of the highest degree. The rest of the class went on for the remainder of their time, Miss Law explaining the rest of the more celebrity of the RIS members, mostly the members that survived the Ur conflict and had made a name for themselves. By the time the class ended and the students had left the room, Miss Law only saw Lyra and Tilia remaining, so she settled in for more questions. I assume you are wanting to know if your sister is safe or not, Miss Law asked Tilia, sitting down on top of her desk with a groan of its legs. Yes, Tilia said, keeping her distance from Lyra. Miss Law smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. She'll be fine. All RIS members have a vet behind them, armed to the teeth. If they get out of line, the vet either kills them or tranks them, keeping the more valuable members under control and usable another day. They may be seeking a redeeming death, but humans are not wasteful of those with talent.
Do they get medical services?
Lyra asked, her ears perked in interest but side-eyeing the yellow coffee beside her.
In battle?
No, Miss Law replied. If they die, they die. Now, while I understand Tilia staying behind, Since her sister is currently on the planet that ship is heading to, I'm not sure why you stayed behind Lyra. Lyra played with the tips of her padded fingers, clicking her nails together as she mulled over the words in her head.
Well,
Lyra began, looking over at Tilia and then to Miss Law.
is there no way to, fix them?
Tilia seemed interested in this as well, blinking at Miss Law as her own ears perked. Miss Law, however, smiled sadly, crossing her thick, muscular legs with another groan of the desk. No, Lyra. I'm afraid there is no way to fix them, and there have been no signatures found within the genetic code yet. Whatever weapon the Pactless had used, it had irreparably damaged the genetic code of some humans, and done so invisibly. You would think some Kojin or Pwa would be able to figure it out by now, but no headway has been made in years.
So, they're cursed forever?
Tilia asked, a little disturbed by the idea.
All humans are left to wonder if one bad day will change them into a monster?
Miss Law sighed, rubbing at the corner of her lower left eye. I'm afraid so. It is still rare, mind you, roughly 1 in 8,000 having the chance of having the affliction, but that still leaves plenty of humans to bear the mark. More odd is that there are some humans that go their entire lives without activating the genetic time bomb, only gaining a few moments of rage before they die of old age. She then chuckled, blinking her eyes. I guess that at least lets their descendants have some kind of warning. Take the tranquilizer as a precaution until they die.
Why do they get nicknames?
Tilia asked, grimacing.
It almost sounds like glorification.
Miss Law actually laughed this time, wafting a hand at Tilia. Oh, humans will do that automatically. Celebrities come in all shapes and sizes, and the more well-known of the RIS members gain their own followings as they survive and make a name for themselves. There are entire trading card games down there designed around the RIS survivors, their battles and estimated kills marked on cards, along with special abilities that can be used in the game. Quite popular, really.
Are they really so mad?
Lyra asked, still picking at her fingertips with her nails.
Do they not find peace even for a short time?
Miss Law turned to the white-furred Katja, tilting her draconic head. They do for a time. After long climactic battles, they feel more at ease, sometimes remaining normal for years on end, as a matter of fact. What matters is they can get all that energy out of them, to be let loose and able to kill for as long as possible to satiate the monster inside them. As dark as it sounds, the humans treat them the same way they do earthen dogs. They let them run for as long as possible so they get tired out and are able to be as peaceful as they can be for a while.
How long do they need to be active for?
Lyra asked, worry etching into her eyes. Tilia grimaced.
Active is the right word. Killing sounds so...
I know, Miss Law said politely, nodding towards Tilia. There is no way to put what they do. The whole thing is a mess and scares the combined inner Dulcier coalition to their very bones. She sighed, leaning back on her hands just to mog the 2 smaller Katja in front of her, her sweater protesting with a stretch of fabric. If an RIS company can land and initiate a combat for up to 5 hours, that buys their members a few months of peace. A full day of combat, that buys them a year. If the company can run hot butchering for a few days at length, that buys them a couple of years, all times having the ability to be spaced out with tranking. While Tilia stared blandly at Miss Law's face, Lyra was instead staring at Miss Law's stomach and legs, having never realized how much muscle their teacher actually had. Lyra murmured, then blinked, looking up at Miss Law's face.
What do they do during their time of lucidity?
Miss Law shrugged. read and watch movies mostly. As they start to grow hungry, they have to be heavily tranquilized. But at some point, the bloodlust starts to make them grow mad, only subsiding when they know they are about to go into combat. Over time, their dosage increases until they are left completely unconscious, in which they dream.
Oh.
Lyra and Tilia said at the same time, tails wagging with interest. I interviewed Mad-Eye Millie at length during her short time of lucidity, and she does a lot of knitting, mostly baby clothes, which is heartbreaking. But I did respect her request to take them down to Earth for newborns. Miss Law murmured, remembering the massive box she carried with her, full of booties, hats, and gloves. She would knit while binge-watching series and movies, eyes wide and ingesting them like food. She told me that when they have to put her under, all the way under, she replays them in her head, dreaming of a life she could have had. Tilia frowned.
She watches romances, doesn't she?
As many as she can get in before the madness takes her. Miss Law replied dourly. In her mind, she is with her dead husband-to-be, living the life she wanted. When she wakes, the illusion is shattered, and her body turns the sorrow into rage. The humans, after she made a name for herself and survived more battles than I have the taste to name, gave her a pair of maces, the heads shaped into hearts.
Do they always get such weapons?
Lyra asked, intrigued. Miss Law shook her head. No. Fresh RIS members are given simple-bladed weapons, hafts of steel given an edge. The more veteran or robust members are slowly given their own weapons, or more unique weapons, like Kate's claws. The three brothers, for instance, wield Lilgaran butcher talons, a specialized melee weapon designed to tear through flesh and armor alike. They are heavy, very heavy, but the immense strength of the humans allows them to be wielded with deadly ease. Tilia went to ask another question, but Miss Law held up a massive clawed hand, her blue scales catching the light. If you want to know more, just go buy a few packs of the cards from the shops. They can tell you more than I can about what those humans use. I've been talking for nearly 2 hours, and there is a hot cup of coffee calling from my room. Now shoot. Tilia and Lyra found themselves in the same elevator, heading up towards the mercantile quarter of the station. Tilia was standing on the far left of the elevator, while Lyra was standing to the right, hands clasped in front of her as she tried not to make eye contact with Tilia. Not that Lyra would, as the white-furred Katja had been taught to never look a yellow fur in the eyes, no matter how nice they may act. The silence could not last forever, though, as it was a very long elevator ride that ran priority.
Surprised you got onto the station,
Tilia muttered, more to break the silence than to acknowledge the white fur. Lyra nearly jumped at the words, then started fidgeting with her pawed fingers again.
Yes, well, Shishi and Kara were able to get me off-world. They were quite excited to have me be in human space.
Shishi and Kara. Tilia mused, lifting a brow. You must be from one of the outer worlds. Explains why you're even still alive. Lyra's eyes threatened to burn with tears, but she managed to wrangle her emotions. Of all the Katja she had to deal with on her home planet, a smaller colony world, the Yellows had always been the most cruel, the most blunt.
Yes, well,
Lyra said quietly.
I am here now, so...
Tilia smirked.
Your parents figured you were safer here then?
Likely spent their entire savings to get you all the way to the station.
I'd even wager the humans gave you a scholar card with a preloaded funding slate so you could afford food.
Lyra was struggling a bit now, her vision going a little blurry. It was true, after all. Lyra had arrived with a bag of third-hand suits, patched by her mother and barely afforded by her father, just so that she could possibly fit in with the other Katja. The humans already knew of her financial status and had pre-approved her for a funding slate, giving her a generous amount of dollars on her thick piece of oval ovaplastic. Lyra was still terrified of using it to buy anything other than food, and was now sitting on a rather substantial chunk of change. She had been urged by her human support staff to buy whatever she liked, but she still felt an immense sense of fear, even when she finally broke and bought a single pack of socks. The station was chilly, and she couldn't stand the feel of her numb toes for any longer than she had willed herself to suffer. "How much do they give you anyway?" Tilia asked, pulling out her data slate and tapping along it to open her messages. "A couple hundred Earth credits so you can buy stuff from the food court?" Lyra glanced at the yellow-furred Katja, then back down at her feet, trying her best not to sniff before she spoke.
4,000 a month?
Tilia turned to look at the white Katja full on for the first time, finger poised above her data slate. 4,000 a month? Tilia winced, fidgeting faster with her pawed fingertips.
Well, they knew how poor Shisi and Kara were, so they,
What are you wearing these old suits for? Tilia nearly shouted, gesturing to the old and patched Katja full-body outfit that were the norm on their home worlds. "You can afford human clothes like me!" Lyra's ears drooped.
Kara made them for me.
Ugh. Tilia groaned, running a hand down her face with a roll of her eyes. "You empty-headed white fur! Don't you think your mother would like to see her little Midna Kankra walking about in expensive human clothing? You could buy some, send them off home, and your parents could sell them to make extra money." Lyra's ears, once drooping, perked up as her eyes went wide. "Huh? Oh, please, do you have any idea what the yellow, blacks, and blues would pay for a couple of sweatshirts?" Tilia scoffed with a flip of her hand. "You think the humans are able to sell this stuff on our planet? Hell no! They have to be sent back by other Katja." Lyra's mind buzzed. Her parents would be able to afford better food gels and nutrition bars, as well as get out of the old HAB unit they were currently living in. A green and brown having a child was odd enough, but the child coming out white had caused them to lose nearly all the good job opportunities in their community. They had been able to afford a first landing HAB unit, a leaky little thing that was barely staying together, only thanks to her father.
I can...
Lyra looked to the yellow fur beside her, tail twitching with nerves.
I can buy clothes and send them back home?
Tilia shrugged. I mean, yeah. You being here means you're under human watch anyway, so no one is going to bother your parents when the packages arrive. Since you bought them and sent them home, they can sell them as they please. She sniffed, tapping along her data slate again. Just don't send too much at once or the local door knockers will get suspicious and claim they're running a smuggling ring. A few sweaters and a pair of pants every month won't pull too much attention. Lyra, having no idea that was even a thing, turned to Tilia, her white tail giving a slight wag.
Thank you.
Don't, Tilia said, raising a yellow finger in warning. Do not thank me, Nedwall. The last thing I need is someone thinking I'm rubbing tails with you or something. Lyra nodded, turning away quickly and staring back at the elevator door.
Of course, my apologies.
Despite the warning, Lyra smiled to herself, her tail giving another wag, something that made Tilia suck her teeth in annoyance. When the elevator door opened, Tilia beat a hasty retreat from the presence of Lyra and sped off to get a coffee, leaving the white-furred Katja on her own. Lyra was not big on fashion, but knew that she probably looked the part of the broken outcast in these suits, no matter how much she loved them, due to her mother's patches and repairs. She wouldn't throw them away, obviously, but likely keep them as a memento of home. Making her way along the many stores, Lyra was not sure where to go first, turning left and right as she coursed her eyes along the many different styles of clothing. Multiple humans had stopped to ask her if she needed help, and despite desperately wanting it, she had politely declined. White furs always had to decline, to grovel and shy away, something that had been instilled into her by the Katja at large since she was but a small kitling.
You don't have to do that here, you know.
Lyra spun around towards the voice and took a step back. Sitting on a bench, arms spread out along the backrest, was the oddest-looking brown-furred Katja she had ever seen. Eyes the shade of a warm latte and fur chocolate brown. The Katja was clearly fully seated within the arms of human fashion. Her thick lips were pierced. A single hoop on the bottom lip that gleamed in steel, and long bangs drifted across her right eye, casting her face in soft shade. Around her wrists were bracelets that bore short, studded spikes, and her clothing was that of the general alternative fashions that Lyra had seen in some of the windows. Ripped black jeans, tall laced Kafia combat paw boots, and an off-shoulder top that showed off more fur than Lyra had ever seen in her life, completed the Kafia's look. She was a prime example of the human-infected Kafia that Lyra had heard warnings of, the rogue Kuwai, that turned their backs to the Kafian ways of life.
What?
Lyra asked, quickly placing her hands in front of her as per usual, submissive both in tone and posture. The brown fur clicked her tongue, an odd sound due to the bottom lip piercing.
Jeez, knock it off, will ya?
She stood, smacking her large brown tail to dust it.
You look like I'm about to cuff you on the back of the neck for talking to me.
Lyra smiled with a strain at the corner of her eyes, as that had happened quite a few times in her teenage years, as well as getting kicked square in the chest and launched out of a shop on the main street of her town.
Go on, relax,
she said, shaking her hands with a jangle of her studded bracelets.
Loosen up there, Ghost Fur.
Lyra's ears drooped slightly, but she unclasped her hands, giving them a little shake with an uneasy smile.
That'll have to do for now,
the brown Kafia said with a quirked brow, then offered her hand towards Lyra.
I'm Moki.
Lyria,
Lyra replied, taking the woman's hand uneasily. The quirked brow was joined by its sister as Moki looked surprised.
Lyra? Isn't that the name of an ancient mood goddess or something?
you know of the old ways?
Lyra asked quietly, instinctively looking over her shoulders and stepping closer.
How?
Moki shrugged.
Information's a little looser the further away you get from heart planets. We had an old elder that knew a few teachings that had been passed down orally. Lyra, the white moon of the first planet. The great white Kafia that danced with her brother. A black fur speckled with starlight.
I've never met another Kafia that knew that.
Lyra nearly giggled out, taking Moki's hand in hers.
I thought only my parents knew.
Easy there, Moonfur.
Moki said, though she was grinning at the clearly excited white Kafia in front of her.
Now I have to imagine that you're looking to buy some clothes, right? If you're like me, you're gonna be sending some home too. I'd be willing to wager your poor parents are put up in the bricks.
Lyra tilted her head.
Bricks?
Poorer area.
Oh, yeah.
Lyra replied, frowning.
Old Hab unit from the first colony.
Moki visibly grimaced at that tidbit.
Fuck's sake.
Who?
Nothing. Here, let's get you set up with some basic fare, I think.
Lyra followed behind Moki, more out of habit than anything else, and was led into a store that sold more basic, well-rounded human apparel. Being white-furred, Lyra was able to fit into any color with ease, though Moki appeared to treat brighter colors with the same disdain as someone would when finding shit on the bottom of their shoes. The only color that appeared to pass her muster was dark red, which she tended to linger on before handing the clothing off to Lyra. Under the careful eye of Moki, Lyra gained over 2 weeks of outfits, as well as some small items that she could mail to her parents in order to generate a little more income on her home planet. After a quick stop at the auto tailor, Lyra's new cargo pants were tail-ready, and she was shoved into a changing room by Moki. It was awkward at first, requiring Moki to pop her head under the changing room door and issue pointers on how to get that Kafia-adjusted bra on. But Lyra found her way in the end. A small issue arose when she pulled on a fresh long-sleeved top, woven from cotton and linen with small ties around the arms. As Lyra pulled it on, she found it ended right below her ribcage, leaving her fur-covered stomach open to the air.
Moki,
Lyra said flatly, giving the hem a few small tugs to see if it had some auto-level function.
where's the rest of it?
Rest of what?
Moki asked, popping her head back under the door with data slate in hand. Lyra gestured to the uncovered portion of her white stomach.
The rest of the top?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. What's the problem?
I'm naked! That's the problem!
Moki snorted.
It's just your stomach, Lyra. Worried some human is gonna see your belly button or something?
But I'm not fully covered!
Lyra quietly shouted in a panic, running her fingers along her stomach fur.
What if someone sees?
Moki leveled her eyes at the silently hyperventilating white Kafia, eyebrows neutral.
Lyra, we're not in a Katja world. You don't have to hide every inch of your fur.
But what if someone sees?
Lyra repeated, going to take off the top.
What if I'm reported?
Moki shouted, reaching up and slapping at Lyra's hands.
Stop that. You're on a human station. No one can do a damn thing to you, and your parents have immunity. For fuck's sake, you're carrying around a data slate issued by the UAA government. Relax.
But...
Lyra said, cowering under the correct hands of Moki.
But nothing.
Moki said, now reaching up with both hands to correct Lyra's top while her data slate balanced on her stomach.
Treat this as your first lesson in liking yourself. You're in Nedwo on a human station. No one's gonna drag you off into a dark corner and take you out just because you have moon fur.
Lyra's heart was hammering in her ribcage as she looked down at herself, shoulders and stomach showing more fur than she had ever had in public.
But...
No buts.
Moki said sternly, tugging Lyra's cargo pants down another inch to show off her hip bones.
Now put on those station socks and come on out. Time to be who you were always supposed to be.
Despite the statement, it still took a lot of coaxing from Moki and a lot of offered praise from the store staff to finally get Lyra to leave the dressing room. Once out in the open air, and still trying to tug down on the hem of the crop top, Lyra nearly crumbled to pieces over the explosion of chatter from the human store staff. Being called cute and adorable was not something Lyra was used to, and she could feel the sweat pouring down her back and tail. With her extra clothing on the way to her room via a helpful AI delivery vehicle and the parcels to her parents sent down to the shipping terminal, Lyra slowly became accustomed to her clothing. Walking beside the brash and open Moki slowly built her confidence, the brown Katja making sure to glare or bare her teeth at any Katja who threw a sideways glance at Lyra. The warnings from her weren't ignored. Moki came from a warrior clan of high repute on the fringe planets within Katja control, a clan that was further marking themselves with the curious piercings that humans had introduced to the arm of the galaxy.
Are you sure this is fine?
Lyra asked, looking down at her sleeved arms and open stomach.
Humans wear this stuff?
Moki smiled.
Of course. Well, probably warmer stuff up on the station, but you need to get out of that Katja shell you've been wrapped up in. I know how moon furs are treated, and this is the best place you could ever be.
All right.
Lyra murmured, though she was enjoying all the smiles she got from the humans, Pwa and Kojin.
So what did you want to do next? I saw the balance on that card of yours. You didn't even make a dent in it.
Moki said, reaching up and stretching her arm muscles and back. Lyra watched her. She was very lithe, much like a yellow fur, but it was always fascinating seeing how much muscle the warlike colors had.
Well, I was hoping to buy some trading cards.
Trading cards?
Moki asked, cocking an eyebrow.
What do you need trading cards for?
Miss Law mentioned that humans have them for members of the RIS, and they piqued my interest, I suppose.
Lyra replied, going back to fidgeting with her pawed fingers.
What do you do at the station, if I may ask?
Moki pointed above her.
I work at the docks.
The docks?
Lyra asked, surprised.
Not station security?
What? A warrior clan Katja can't relax and just lift heavy stuff?
Moki said with a wink, then clicked her teeth.
I don't like the Kojin, though. They like to show off and haul around more stuff than me.
After a bit of negotiating with the map of stores, the two Katja found a single store that carried the trading cards, a little place that was made up of mostly gaming tables and a long wall of merchandise. According to the store owner, most of the stuff people wanted came from Earth directly via mail shuttles, as there was little sense to have a huge stock of gaming stuff on an orbiting space station. Lyra was happily talking to the heavy-set human at the counter when she froze. Her eyes locked at a glance towards the door. Both the man and Moki were confused until they looked, spying Tilia standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. Tilia looked Lyra from toe to ear tip, her face judging with raised eyebrows. Wow! From bodysuits to crop tops in only a few hours. You Nedwos were quick. Her words were cut off as a pack of playing cards thwacked off her forehead, causing the yellow-furred Katja to stumble backwards. What the shit? Tilia howled, rounding around to say something else before spying the larger brown Kafia. Moki, without missing a beat, picked up another pack of cards and brandished it.
You want another one, Dakuyas?
Being called a pissfur by a brown was a heavy slight to a yellow, but Tilia knew full well that Moki could make her suck on her own foot. Plus, she had that lip piercing and was wearing all black, which put her in the fringe Black Moon warrior clan. That didn't stop her fur from standing on end in rage, Moki following suit as Lyra shrunk backwards behind the brown Kafia.
I would like to avoid calling the station's current lead female to take care of this.
The human said, sighing out while running a hand along his growing bald spot.
She doesn't like how many calls the store generates in the first place during game nights. I warned her about slaughter tournaments, but she still sends me hate emails.
Lyra, despite her trembling tail and fingers, leaned around the shoulder of the lowly, growling Moki.
Tilia, could we just open cards?
Tilia's eyes snapped to Lyra's, which were glancing back and forth between her and Moki, and it took everything she had not to growl back. Getting upstaged by some military dirt stomper was going to make her look bad, but she really wanted to look at the cards too. Fine, Tilia spat, crossing her arms. But I'm not sitting next to your bodyguard. Lyra placed a hand on Moki's shoulder, which oddly enough seemed to instantly ease the brown Kafia's ire.
Moki?
Yeah, sure.
Moki muttered, flexing her strong fingers.
But if the butter dog gets uppity, she's gonna get a fresh one.
Ooh, a rare!
Lyra said with a happy trill to her voice, pulling up the card that bore Gunner Mason.
He looks right mean, too.
Lyra had been happily ripping packs for nearly half an hour, going over the stats of the RIS member, while Tilia and Moki glared at each other from opposite sides of the table, being put on reluctant sorting duty by the white fur and her growing mound of wrappers. What kind is he then? Tilia asked, arranging all her female cards in stacks of rarity. Moki tilted her head at Tilia in a rather mocking fashion, fangs bared in false sweetness.
Why, I would wager he uses a gun, Yellowfur.
Tilia scowled, narrowing her lilac eyes at Moki's milky hazels.
He uses a brace of pistols, actually.
Lyra chirped, showing the two warring Kafia the card.
See? Carries 6 Colt Pythons into combat and is even an Ur War veteran.
Tilia grimaced. I would hate to imagine the body count that maniac has stacked up.
Could likely wrap the bodies around the station laid side to side.
Moki agreed, both of them leaning down to look at the card's picture. Gunner Mason looked part man, part metal, a mishmash of steel skull plate and ragged blonde hair. His dark blue eyes looked keen, predatory, but he was clearly losing the structural integrity of his body. His legs were haggard, missing more flesh than his armor was plating, and appeared to have a bad spine judging from the slight forward lean.
Mean-looking bastard.
Moki mused, holding up the card.
Has seen battle on 12 planets and 21 stations, clearing out the He's old, too. Likely gonna die on the battlefield or of his wounds.
Tilia flicked an ear, looking at Moki. Is that common? Dying of wounds?
Sometimes, from what I hear.
Moki replied, handing the card to the happily wagging Lyra.
Their bodies just give out and get buried like the rest.
Makes me wonder about this poor woman, Tilia murmured, holding up another rare card. Granny Gray, 70 years old and in service to the RIS. Moki held out her hand, taking the card when Tilia handed it to her. She read it over slowly, all while glancing at the crazed woman's face.
Seems she changed over when her daughter had her 3rd miscarriage. Drove her mind right over a cliff. Served on nearly every planet during the war. Probably why she is one of the rainbow cards.
How does an old woman survive war? Tilia asked, taking more of the standard cards from Lyra.
Beats me. Just one of those human things. Even the old ones can have the ability to rip off your head or jam their thumbs into your eyeballs if they find the will to. Granny Gray there is just a dish of unending will.
Human spirit.
Lyra corrected as she tore open another pack, shuffling through the cards with newfound expertise as the two other Kafia turned to look at her. She looked at them, blinking.
That's their will. Human spirit.
Tilia frowned, looking down at the female cards in front of her. Then, do they suffer this fate once their spirit is broken somehow?
Explains why they are all so tragic in origin.
Moki said, holding up a small selection of cards as she carried on.
Wife killed in traffic accident, firstborn son found dead in bathtub, death of father, death of mother, calculation error that caused the death of 30 voidmen on their ship, junior enlisted bled out in arms.
Tilia held up her own selection of cards, ears drooping as she read along. Child dead during birthing trials. Husband shot and killed during robbery. Daughter found to be a victim of rape by family friend. Son found hanging from closet due to heartbreak.
Yeah,
Lyra said, sighing down at the cards.
I do believe that is the theme. Their spirit becomes broken by some tragedy, and something within their broken DNA causes their human spirit to overcompensate.
They should have found a way to fix it by now, Tilia said quietly, setting down the long fan of cards. It doesn't make sense. DNA can be fixed as easily as a leaky roof. Moki pressed her lips together, a human thing she had picked up after working with them for so long, then let out an angry sigh as she set down her own fan of cards.
Ice cream.
Huh?
Lyra said with a tilt of the head, placing the rarer cards into the little sleeve book she had bought.
We need ice cream.
Moki stated flatly, then slapped her thighs and stood up.
Come on.
Tilia furrowed her brows. What do you mean, come on? I'm not getting ice cream with you.
Lyra, buy the yellow some ice cream.
Moki said, then took a single step before turning back around.
As a matter of fact, you're buying us both ice cream.
Lyra blinked for a few heartbeats, then brightly smiled, realizing she was about to have a sweet treat with a friend.
Okay.
White furs. Tilia muttered under her breath, standing and sliding the rest of the cards into a small box that had held all the unopened card packs.
Ice cream.
Moki said again, clapping her hands.
Come on. There's a cup of peanut butter chocolate with my name on it, and you two are slowing me down.
Lyra quickly slid a few more cards into their sleeves, then combined the rest of the lower rarity cards into another box. Tilia stacked the boxes and slid them under an arm, hanging her head back with a weary sigh as Lyra went trotting after Moki.
Coming!
Lyra called out in a sing-song way, stepping up beside the brown-furred Kafia with her card binder pressed to her chest.
What is peanut butter?
Moki laughed as Tilia brought up the rear.
Oh, you're gonna love this stuff. It tastes like happiness pressed into a paste.
It gets stuck in your teeth and the roof of your mouth, Tilia said, annoyed. But at the moment, she did feel like a nice scoop of cherry chocolate chunk. Moki turned her head, smiling.
That's the best part. You spend all day licking it out of your teeth while at work.
Ew!
Lyra laughed out, the three Kafia rounding the corner of the store. The swarm of station chatter and noise swallowed them, Moki leading the way to the ice cream shop as a second midnight alcove slid by the station, unknown and unseen. And that was Chapter 21, RIS of Humanity of the Drop Pod Green Sci-Fi series, written by Guardbro and proofread by Franners. If you like these stories and others like them, be sure to subscribe to Guardbro's Field Desk, join us on the Discord, or become a member of the Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi members get a special channel on the Discord, sneak peeks at future chapters, as well as access to the works in progress of all artwork. And now a shout out to our first shirts, starting with Drew That One Stadiar, Decimus, Sabre K, Duke of Spooks, Rusty Reb, Gonkus, Fernay, Some Dude, Grandpa, Warcaster, Scandrin, Ebon Kitsune, Nessence, Jarnhu, Marcus Theodoric, Savage, The Other Killjoy, Calistred, Aaron Wilbur, Werewaffengeist, E-Machine O, Cody Jero, Death's Dancer, and Insane Medic. And in E4 Mafia, we have Lyctus, Cap H, Marked 1, Lone Burro, Oogbar, Bakashi Lord Caliber, Hot Potato Grenadier, Tiamat, Sonic Arrow, Sleepy John, Valk Bambi, Shadow Man, Baiko, Damon Bane Plays, Chiba Chigoni, Inquisitor Matt, Hellhound 23, Nox Vox, Dazzlinder, Darkside, Kiwi Bastard, Lacunai, Matty Boy, and Crusader of Florida. And in Snuffy Squad, we have Draconis, Split Iris Bear, Calico Neko, Daryl Francis, E, Mackey, Kira, Milkman, Des94, Lacunai 8, Alan Solano 9, Swamp Yankee, Breach, Blade 7, Mimsy, Saxons Mueller, Stacker 6818, Emperor Dipshit, Chaos Spartan, Venid Lara, Antilus, Woe Class, Chibi CV, Moonshot 421, John Doe 4321, Yanikoi, Fafner 13, Toyin, Martlesby, Noodle, Mika, Scott Anderson, Vertus the Fox, Damon McQuinn, Super Stink 64, Elder Rock, Croman, Dow 3K, Jules, Blawlore Lord, Thrace Vega, Dave and Sean Holtz, Andrew and Gil, Yeti Potato, Skelters, Kite Zero, Classy Cthulhu, Diesel Dog, Coffee Commander, Anto, Duncan D, and 13.2 by 14mm Ein. Until we see you next time on this side of the veil, I'm Larissa, and this is Guard Bros Field Desk.